Hi, today I'm going to show you how to clean the push button controls and the volume controls on music and sound remote stations that are used with music and sound intercom models MC302, MC602, and MC702. And roughly those are models that were made from the early 1990s through the early 2000. They were very popular models for music and sound, but they have the same problem that all intercom systems have, which are the push button switches and the volume controls get dirty when you push them in and out like this. They make a scratchy, staticky sound, which is annoying. If they're really, really dirty, they may not make good connections at all, and then it appears as if things don't work. The volume controls, same problem. They will sit at some setting for years and years and years and years, and then somebody turns it one day and all of a sudden the sound disappears because you've moved it from the clean spot where it's been sitting to a dirty spot that's been uncovered, and all the sound goes away. To do this, you're going to need just a few things. You're going to need a rag, you're going to maybe need a Phillips screwdriver, and you're going to need some cleaner. Now this is the cleaner that we recommend. This is called Deoxit D5. Deoxit, and here it's D5. They have lots of different series of it, and this is the kind that we've been using exclusively for probably the last 12 or 15 years, and it works really, really, really well. Of course, it says here in their little advertising blurb, removes oxidation, improves connection, seals and protects surfaces, and it's safe on plastic, and it has a flushing action and all of those other really good things that you want in a cleaner. The easiest place to get this is from Amazon. I will put a link in the video description down there of it on Amazon, so you can just go there and order it. The nice thing about this can also is this is one of those cans that when you buy it, it holds 5 ounces. You actually does seem like it's got like 5 ounces in it. It's not one of those cans where you think there's only this much in the bottom. It's actually fairly full and it lasts a long time. So it's not really expensive, probably $12, $14, something like that. Not too bad. This is the go-to cleaner that everybody needs, and then sometimes, which I'll talk about as we move along, you also may want this. This is also Deoxit. It's F5. And technically this is for cleaning faders. Faders are sliding volume controls. This is a rotary volume control. You turn the knob. Some equipment has sliding volume controls that you slide the knob back and forth. The difference between this and this is this does a really good job of cleaning. This does a job of cleaning also, but also it has more lubricants in it because it's for things that slide. And sometimes if you have really, really stubborn switches that really the D5 cleaner, it's much better, but it's not really quite good enough. Sometimes a little bit of this comes in handy also. I always have both available because you never know what you're going to need. Now, there are several different series of remote stations that look more or less like this. For the MC602 and MC702, you'll have 4 push buttons and a volume control. For the MC302, you'll have 3 push buttons and a volume control, but they're all basically designed the same way, so the steps to clean them are identical. Let's look at what this consists of. Here I have one that I've taken out of another remote station just like this one, and you can see you've got the 4 little button caps here that you press with your fingers. You've got the volume control. Let's go ahead and take these off so you can actually see what the switches and volume controls look like. That one came off difficult. So behind the button caps you have 4 push button sort of plunger switches like this. I don't know if you'll be able to see it really well or not, but if you look really carefully along here, along the top of these switches, it's all kind of dusty and kind of cruddy looking, because what happens is this is on the back of the speaker grill here, and this is mounted in your wall like this. So this is on the outside of the wall in the bedroom, for instance, and this is inside the wall cavity, in between the studs and the sheetrock. If you have a house that has insulation in the attic, especially blown in insulation, you know, that gray fibrous cellulose stuff that they used to use in the 90s and 2000s, over time that will filter down through the wall cavity between the studs and between the sheetrock, and it gets on the switches because this is all exposed. That eventually will find its way into the switch because you push it and it filters in, and these are very, very, very fine particles, so it's not hard to get in there. And what happens over time is when the fibrous particles and dirt and stuff gets down inside the switches, it gets on the contacts inside the switch. Inside the switch are metal contacts, and when you push the switch, the contacts slide back and forth like this. If the exposed part of the switch, this part here or this part under here or wherever, if it has those fine microscopic particles on it, every time you push the switch like this, it's like rubbing sandpaper on the metal contact. You're rubbing the metal parts with the gritty stuff on it, and it causes little microscopic scratches in the surface of the metal. You can't fix that unless you replace the switches, which can be done, but it's a more extreme step and it's not something most people are going to do. By cleaning them, you flush away the dirt and stuff that's inside. It helps improve the metal surface. Remember, improves connections. So that's what this is for. The other thing that happens with the metal contacts inside the switch are when they're coated with the fine particles of the insulation and dirt and dust and stuff like that, that tends to hold moisture from the humidity in the air. And over time, especially if they don't get used very much, that moisture will cause the metal contacts to oxidize. They'll get a coating on them. And then when you do push it, the coating prevents the metal from making a good connection with the other piece of metal, and the switch doesn't seem like it wants to work. The same thing sort of happens with the volume control here. This is a rotary volume control because it's round, and you turn the knob like this to rotate the contact inside. So what's inside here is it's a ring of carbon, like pencil lead, and it has a very fine wire wrapped around it. That's why it's called a wire wound volume control. And then connected to the shaft right here is a little contact, and as you turn the contact like this, you're moving the contact around the donut and it's making different connections. What happens is the volume control would be set at a particular setting, let's say roughly 12 o'clock. It stays at 12 o'clock for years and years and years and years and years, and before you know it, 20 years has gone by. And what happens is the dirt and the dust get down inside the volume control, and it covers the wire windings on each side of the movable contact. So the movable contact is sitting on a relatively clean spot, while the wires on either side have become dirty and oxidated. They have that coating on them. And then one day the grandkids come over and they turn the knob and the sound disappears because you've moved the contact from the clean spot where it's been sitting forever to a dirty spot where it's not making a good connection, and the sound disappears. So these need to be cleaned also. Sometimes when I talk to people on the phone, there'll be some debate about cleaning switches. It's like, no, I don't think that's necessary, but it is. Because the way you have to look at this is, wires are connected to this that come from your master station, and sound comes through those wires, whether it's the radio playing in or when you're using the intercom, it's your voice going back out. All of those sounds, whichever type they are, at some point go through the switches. If the switches don't make good connections, then the sound doesn't go anywhere, and that can be a problem. So the cleaning process is pretty easy. You're going to start with your deoxit D5, and you're going to use the little red straw that comes with it, so you can target the spray. And we're going to spray cleaner on the stems of each of the 4 push button switches. Now, you don't necessarily have to take the speaker apart to do that. In fact, if you're really careful, you don't have to even take it off the wall. What you're going to do is you're going to pull the 4 button caps off. And these, because of the way they're made, they actually come off pretty easily with just your fingers like that. So we're just going to pull them off. And you can see these, if you look carefully, the bottom part down here that's been exposed to the house side of the station is pretty white and clean, but the part that's been behind the grill, exposed to the inside of the wall, it's kind of dirty and grubby because it's got the dirt and dust and crud on it. In fact, if I wipe it off on the rag, the dirt and crud's gone now, and you can see what it looks like when it's mostly clean. And that's a good example of what goes wrong. So what you're going to do to clean this is, and this is where your rag comes in, you want to make sure that you don't get the spray on your wall. So you use your rag to cover up the wall and make sure nothing runs down or drips down from the back of the speaker onto your painted wall or wallpaper or something like that. And you take your deoxit D5 and you very carefully put the straw next to where the stem of the switch goes into the body of the switch, and you spray a little bit like that. Once you've sprayed it, then you push the switch in and out with your finger And then you maybe spray it a little bit more and do the second one and the third one and the fourth one. And then you push the buttons in and out with your finger again to get the cleaner distributed inside the switch. When you do this, the very best thing to do is you do it with the system on and playing music. Because when you do that, you can actually hear the improvement. So if you push the button with the radio on before you begin, you'll probably get some amount of scratchy sound when you push the button in and out. Then you spray the switch, and then you push it again, and as you do that, the scratchiness will go away and it should be improved. That's how you do it here. Let me show you with this one how you do it in detail, even though you're not going to take it out. So here's our switchboard out of another music and sound remote station. We have our 4 push button switches. This is basically what I just showed you. You spray a little bit with the straw between where the black stem goes into the white body. Now, like this. And when I say you spray a little bit, that means a little bit. The littlest bit that you possibly can. It doesn't mean that you empty half the can inside one switch, because all you're going to do is waste the cleaner. It's not going to all go into the switch, and it's going to end up running down the wall and make marks on your painted wall. And you don't want that. And remember, you need a rag to catch it, just in case there's a little bit. So we're going to spray a little bit on each one. And then you push the switches. It's not really very complicated. And how much do you spray and how many times do you do it? Well, it depends on how improved it is. If you get it the first time and it's good and you're happy with it, then you're done. You can move on to the next one. If it's not quite good enough, if you think it could be a little better, then do it a little bit more and see. There is no predetermined amount that you do. You do it till it's better, because that's the whole point. Now we have to talk about doing the volume control. The volume control is a little tricky to do. So you can see on the round volume control pot, on the body of it, here's the stem that the knob goes onto. And right here in the front of it is a little notch or a punch out, a little opening right here. That's where the cleaner needs to go. It needs to go inside the little hole. So it gets inside the volume control, and then you turn it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what I always do is I turn the volume control so it's at full, maximum, fully clockwise. And then you spray a little bit, and then you turn it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then you leave it at the lowest setting, fully counterclockwise. And then you spray a little more, and then you turn it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that will usually clean it up really well. Now, this is very simple to do here when I'm holding the switch in my hand, because you can see the little notch in the housing and spray right into it. But when it's mounted in your remote speaker, it's a little trickier. The problem with doing it when the station's on the wall is you can pull the volume control knob off. Sometimes they're a little tough to get off. And here's the stem that the knob fits onto, but there's only the littlest tiny gap around the stem in through the faceplate, barely enough to push this little flat screwdriver into, and that makes it kind of tricky. Also, you have to know where the little punch out is in the volume control pot to get the cleaner into, and also the gap around it is too small to insert the red tube. So that's kind of a problem. Sometimes, if your volume controls aren't really super bad, sometimes you can clean them up by just rotating them back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and that will cause the wiper to move back and forth, the movable contact, and it will rub away the dirt and oxidation, and it will improve. If that doesn't really do it for you, if that's not good enough, then what you have to do is take this off the wall, turn it around. You don't have to disconnect the wires. You can just sort of move it around so you can see, and then do the very best you can, of course using your rag to catch any overspray so you don't get yelled at, and spray a little bit of volume control where you can into the gaps on the volume control and then turn the knob back and forth. You can't see the front of the volume control with the little notch in it. All you can really see is the edge here where the back part is assembled to the front piece. And that's the part you can see when you turn the speaker over on the back. And all I did was I sprayed just a little bit on the seam. And some of it will find its way inside. And then you turn it back and forth and back and forth. And then maybe you do it again. It isn't always quite as good as spraying it directly inside, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You can usually, after you've sprayed it and you're rotating it back and forth, you can feel it improve. It will become smoother and easier to turn. So those are the basic steps for cleaning the controls on a music and sound remote station. Last thing, when you're all done, you have to put the button caps back on, and you just simply place them over the stem of the switch and push them down and they'll snap right on, not a problem. The other thing is, if you take the volume control off, the volume control has a little notch or a little indicator on it right here to show where it's set. You want that to be lined up correctly. So the best way to do that is you turn the volume control to high, to fully clockwise, and that little pointer on the knob should point at where it says high on the grill. That way it's lined up correctly. And then when you turn it down, it points towards low. So when you walk by and look, you have some idea where it's set. That's how you clean the controls on a music and sound inside remote station for models MC302, MC602, and MC702. I hope you found this interesting, and maybe for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.